morning. It's Amanda from the Fundamental Home, and it's Wednesday. It's very early on Wednesday. That's why my lighting is a little subdued, you know, because it's very early morning, just barely light out. I think they call it the gloaming, that kind of day, time of day. And of course, there's a hurricane off the coast. It's kind of way down, but it's heading this way, and you can kind of see it in the sky that it's just starting to become a little bit of moisture in the air. So on that note, don't forget to pray for my friend Trish. Her and her family are in Florida, and they could use your prayers because of the hurricane situation. In fact, my mother lives on the coast of South Carolina, and she will be coming to stay with me for a little while. So you might even get to see my mom on video. So lots of folks to pray for. Just remember them today. Anyway, today is Worthy Wednesday, and of course on Wednesday we talk about how we are worthy of our best efforts, because a lot of times moms, excuse me, they take care of everybody else, but they neglect their own needs. And I actually have about 50 topics in my head that I want to talk to you about, because last week I talked about choosing good friends, and I had people ask me, how do you choose good friends? And at the same time, there's a lot of other topics that we've been discussing on different channels, different friends of mine, things that are on my mind. So I kind of was struggling this morning as to which one to address. And I think I'm just going to stay in order and talk to you about how to choose good friends. And then we'll talk about those other things in the coming weeks. But on the idea of choosing good friends, I am teaching a debate class in my homeschool co-op. And one of the things that we've been talking about quite a bit as we've been viewing videotapes of debates is how candidates or debaters come across. Not just what they're actually saying, but how they communicate with themselves physically, and how the audience or the judges or whoever is looking at the debate receives it. And of course, this being the time of the presidential and vice presidential debates, there's been a lot of talk about how people come across to the voter and the viewer. And one of the things that we discussed in my class on Monday is how people who are debating can have all the right facts. They can know all of the answers, and yet express themselves in a way that is not helpful to their case and cause them to lose the debate. Even though they had all the right facts, even though they had more information, even though their position was better, it's really about how they present themselves, kind of got in the way of communicating their message. And I think that sometimes people do that when it comes to communicating who they are to other people. I think it's really easy to just look on the outside and see how someone presents themselves and think that's actually who they are, or that person is actually a really good friend, when a little bit down the way you actually see what's underneath that facade and find that that person really wasn't a good friend, even though they came across really polished, really smooth, really nice to begin with. And so I really try to look beyond the surface, because I think that if you kind of close your eyes to the surface and actually listen to people, you will find who is a good friend and who is not. You know, if you're watching behaviors, if you're seeing how they treat others, you're going to see what kind of person they really are when no one is watching. And it's going to help you to figure out if they're going to be a good friend or not. I keep my friend circle small. I am friendly to everyone. I have tons of acquaintances, but the fact of the matter is, you just don't have time to be close to everyone. And so I really try to keep my friend circle very small, close friend circle, I should say. I keep my regular friend circle big just because I love everybody, but you know what I'm saying. And I really try to find the very best people that I know are honest and faithful and loyal and kind and loving. And how do you know that? Well, I'll tell you how I found my husband. So we worked together, and we were teenagers at the time, and there are lots of young men who worked with us. But if you watch the young men's behavior, it was actually very easy to tell who would be a good husband in the future, for sure. One of the things that really struck me was there was a disabled gentleman who worked where we worked. And many of the teenage boys would make fun of him. They would. My husband did not. He was my husband at the time. He was a young man. He was 18 years old. He did not. He was kind to them. Them is more than one. Not in a pitying way. In a friendly, kind, gracious way. You know, he would sit and have lunch with them and talk with them and be very kind and polite. And the thing about Rick is that he does not come across always as the most gregarious person. You know what I mean? He's actually, if you meet him in person, he's very quiet for the most part, kind of retiring. I wouldn't go so far as to say shy exactly, but he doesn't always get the most attention. And I think the evidence of that was the fact that he was 18 years old and he had never had a girlfriend prior to that. And I think that it was easy to kind of overlook him because he wasn't the kind of person who was just out there with his personality. But to the discerning eye, you could see through his behaviors that he was really a treasure. So in the way he treated people, that was the absolute thing that bowled me over. But there were other things. You know, he always showed up every single day he was scheduled. A lot of the other teenage boys would call out. He never did. He always showed up. In fact, when he was called in, he would come in extra every single time. He always showed up crisply attired. You know, he wasn't sloppy, he wasn't lazy, he was always polite. You know, anything that he was asked to do, he did it without complaint. You know, one of the things he got asked to do was clean bathrooms. He always did it without complaint. And so, seeing those behaviors in him, I knew that if I married him, he was going to be faithful and show up. He was going to do the hard things like clean bathrooms and not complain. He was going to be kind and loving, you know, even when it wasn't always easy. And so I could tell who he was by really paying attention to what was going on rather than just looking at the surface, because the surface can be deceiving. A lot of times people come across very different than what they actually are, and that's something that we notice when we watch these debates. So when you're choosing good friends, what I would say to you is don't pay attention to who's nice on the surface. You know, Brianna is young and she's lovely, and so she's just starting to get the attention from the boys. And so I have to try to caution her and kind of give her the same advice and say, you know, don't just look at the surface, look beyond that, because the surface fades, right? Not in Rick's case. He's still lovely. But you know, it's more than that. You know, everybody is going to be nice to a cute girl. But that's just the surface. Are they nice to everyone? Are they nice to the little children? Are they nice to the girls who aren't necessarily someone that they're thinking about for future relationships? These are the things that I try to encourage her to consider. You know, do they work? She's a little young for that, but it's just something to look at, you know. Are they hardworking? Are they faithful in the things that they do? Because if they're not faithful in the thing, you know, the Bible says if you're not faithful in the little things, you're not going to be faithful in the big things. So it works the same with friendships. It really does, because marriage is really just the closest friendship. And it works the same way with your relationships with your other friends. You know, a lot of times I meet people for the first time and I think, wow, they're a really great person because they're friendly and they're nice, and I'm friendly and I'm nice, and I think we hit it off, and then a little ways down the road I find out, you know, they're not as nice as I thought immediately. You know, because you get the wrong first impression. A lot of times people meeting me, because I'm really like, when I meet people, I'm really bouncy and I'm happy and I smile. They think that that's all I am always, but the truth of the matter is, underneath that, if you ever watch the things that I do, I am super serious and super organized and super focused. And sometimes after you've known me a little while, if you always expect me to be bouncy and happy, you might be offended that I'm not like that all the time. But I think you really have to take time to get to know people to determine whether or not they're going to be friends. You know, maybe you're cool with the bouncy, happy, also serious person. Or maybe you like someone who's a little more serious on the surface, but underneath is a little more fun. So anyway, the caution here is, again, just look beyond the surface when it comes to good friends, because the truth is we all need friends. We all need good friends. We need support. You know, we need love for one another. So it's not like you can just go without friends. Just find the ones that are real. Just take your time, look beyond however they come across immediately, and that goes for YouTube people. That goes for YouTube. A lot of times people on YouTube, I've actually gotten to know quite a few YouTube people. And there are some people who are exactly what they are on camera. It's exactly what they are. There's no question about it. Some people are a little different, but that doesn't mean that they're fake. Do you know what I mean? I'll give you one example. Justin Rhodes, who I love, is super happy on camera, but when you meet him in person, he's a little more serious than you would imagine. Still a wonderful person. And I don't think he's false. I think that he just is, you only see snippets of his life, so you see the joyous parts, and you forget that he's a real person and he's not always like, you know what I mean? I mean that in the best way. I really do. I think they're wonderful people. Honest to goodness. They're some of the best people I've met on YouTube. So very genuine, very loving, very wonderful, but it's different than what you expect. You know what I mean? So if you met him, you might think, well, that's not exactly what I saw. Well, he's not being honest. That's not what it is. You get the whole picture when you meet them in person. Do you know what I mean? But some people give, because you've been watching longer, like Wrangler Star is a good example. He's got so many videos. I've seen so much of his life, so much of his family. When you meet him in person, you already kind of know who he is because you've seen it so much, right? But then there are other people that come across one way, and then you get to know them, and they're really not what they appear to be. So I encourage you to hold back your decisions on who people are until you get to know them and see what kind of person they are, and then decide whether or not that's someone that you want to promote, if that makes any sense. So it does work the same on YouTube. Not that I'm being critical, I'm putting it out there, I'm being real. That's just how it is. So it's meeting people, it's kind of the same way. I want you to have friendships, I want you to build relationships, but I want you to wait before you really commit yourself to being their friend and really pay attention to their character. Figure out who they actually are, not who they appear to be. And then you will find, if you take your time and wait, you'll find that you have really good, solid friends. And know this too, that nobody has time for, like I said, lots of friends. In your lifetime, you're going to have a handful of excellent, close, wonderful friends who would be there for anything. So don't be surprised if your circle of friends is small. Don't feel like, you know, you're lonely and sad if you only have a couple of friends. Be glad for the ones that you have, because good friends are treasures. They really are. They really, really, really are. So anyway, that is the end of my conversation about choosing good friends. I hope that's helpful to you. I hope it encourages you a little bit that, you know, you don't have to feel bad if it's only a few people in your friend circle, and when you're looking for good people in the future, it gives you kind of a way to take a look at it that's maybe a little bit different than you've done in the past. So anyway, that is our Worthy Wednesday. You're worthy of good friends. You're worthy of people who, you know, as they say, have got your back. I know, and speaking of good friends, let me tell you about my good friend on YouTube, Tangie, the Caver's Wife. If you have not gone to Tangie the Caver's Wife channel and subscribed, you are missing out on a wonderful person. An absolutely wonderful person. So I'm going to link up here to Tangie's channel, speaking of good friends, and I want you to go to her channel and subscribe, because she is my bestest good friend on YouTube, and I can highly recommend her without reservation. So go to Tangie's channel. You want to see her. You want to be encouraged by her. She and I have had times, man, we have Bible studies like every week. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. Sometimes we just get going and it's just how it is. You know, we've prayed together. We have spent some genuine time and closeness talking about different things, praying for other people. And I think that she is someone that you all really need to go subscribe to and spend time with and encourage. So anyway, that's it, you guys. I'm going to enjoy my Wednesday. Like I said, it's early in the morning and Rick is off today and we're gonna hang out as a family. So I hope you all have a wonderful day and I will talk to you later. Bye.